Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 5 Drinks to Midnight. Another show, we bring the questions, guests bring the drinks, we try to wrap up before midnight. Today we are headed to Milady's to meet up with Noah Rothbaum, author of the Whisky Bible, spirits editor for Men's Journal, and editor-at-large for Bartender Magazine. Let's get started. Noah, thank you so much for joining me. 5 drinks at midnight, 5 drinks, 5 questions, midnight, whatever comes first. Thank you so much for joining me at Milady's. How are you doing today, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me on. I feel like a long-time listener, first-time caller, so thanks for having me on the show.
No, thank you so much. I'm so glad that this worked out. Again, big fan, so thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So, question 1, what are we drinking first?
I mean, we're starting with my favorite drinks, right, which is a highball.
Okay.
It's a simple mix of whiskey, club soda, but, it's one of those things anybody can make, but I think takes a lifetime to perfect. Milady's makes a wonderful highball. It's, for me, often it's the perfect concoction because it has that whiskey flavor. I love seltzer, club soda. That's what I run on.
Nice.
So, 2 of my favorite things in one glass.
Perfect.
Sessionable. I mean, look at how beautiful this is.
Exactly, yeah. And again,
I'm not even going to resist. I'm going to take a sip.
I know, as we should. Cheers. But
Cheers to you.
Yeah, and the fucking mug. Like, getting a big frosty mug as a highball, it's...
Yeah, I remember years ago, not too far from here, like in this neighborhood, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you go into a bar, and you'd be like, you couldn't order a highball. You'd have to order a whiskey and soda, right?
Yeah.
And it would come in a usually plastic cup, because that's where we worked 25 years ago, with a red stir, right?
Yeah.
And it would be, I'd often get Dewar's maybe, right? And you'd get this much Dewar's and crappy ice. And then they literally put in like the tiniest splash of soda.
From the gun.
Right, from the gun, God is like hopefully a little bit carbonated, and you'd sit there and, you'd swirl it around and you'd have it, and it's not exactly the highball that we know and love today, but we tried that.
Yeah. Well, question 1, it's always an origin story.
Okay.
So how'd you get into, I guess, the business?
Whatever the hell I do.
Yeah. I mean, you have multiple titles, which we'll get into that, because 2025 was a great fucking year for you.
Yeah,
so,
and
we'll get into it. But how'd you get into the business?
I feel very, very fortunate. Like being in the right place, right time. In '99, I did an internship at Food and Wine.
Okay.
They just hired a new associate editor that nobody ever heard of, named Pete Wells, who obviously went on to become, the New York Times restaurant critic for many years.
Yeah.
And Pete had been Time Out New York's like original bar cocktail guy and really loves cocktails and bars and the stories behind them. And at the same time, Letty Teague, the amazing wine writer, expert, was there, and Kate Crater. So it was like Kino Ulaki. So it was like a real, I had no idea, like, how talented these people were and like how fortunate I was to be there. And it was like one of these things where, I went to some event, I got like a blackberry liqueur or something, and I came in the next day, I helped Gail Green get to the subway because she was lost, right? Again, no idea who she was at the time, right? And I came in and Pete said, great, like, we should bring this to my friend Dale. And I thought, okay. And in my mind, I'm like, this seems messed up. Like his friend Dale gets my model. But, at least I was smart enough not to say that, right? So a few days later, we go see Dale DeGroff at Blackbird, right? He had been, after he left the Rainbow Room, he was for about 2 years running Blackbird in Midtown. And Audrey Saunders was his bar back. That's how long ago it was. I mean, like, it was incredible. Come in, there's Dale behind this, like, beautiful clover-shaped bar. You sit down. I mean, it's not different than this show, to be honest.
Right.
Because you're at the Dale show,
Right.
And I thought, what did I know about drinks? I was 21. And he was like, you're from the Bronx. I'm like, yeah. He's like, have you had the Bronx cocktail? Like, right? Like, and I'm like, what? Like, who's ever heard of a Bronx cocktail? Right?
Yeah.
Most people haven't.
No.
Right. And he was like, oh, like, I'll make you one. I'm like, okay. You know, we give him the bottle. He's like, oh, great, thanks. He's like, I already have this one. You know, like, and, you know, we had lunch there, like big club sandwiches. And, you know, Dale made us, you know, I think 3 different cocktails, like oyster shooters, and, I mean, and Bronx. And third cocktail, I wish I remembered, but I don't. But it was a long ass. And after that, I was like, that summer, you know, doing that, and meeting folks like Dale DeGroff, and doing stories about, like, you know, kind of the beginnings of the rebirth of Irish whiskey, you know, calling distributors to give us samples of Middleton and Cooley, you know, their early whiskeys. And I went back to college for my last year. I was kind of like, I want to, you know, I always knew what I wanted to do. I'm not, you know, I always wanted to be a writer. My parents are voracious readers, and, you know, the school that I went to always prized writing and reading and authors, so that seemed like a, you know, worthy profession.
Sure.
And I was like, this sounds amazing. So I've only really had 2 jobs in my life, like working at like a day camp, a summer day camp, and being a writer.
Love it.
So I kind of went back and I was like, you know, like, I think I really want to write about, like, drinks. Like, there's so many stories. And at the time, like, you know, rye whiskey, like, you know, I like to say in the I think in the Whiskey Bible, we talk about how it's like the Yeti. There were lots of sightings.
Sure, yeah,
but like nobody could get their hands on it, right? Even in New York. You know, whiskey was just starting to come back, you know, a little bit, you know. And all the hipsters were starting to drink single malts and bourbon and then rye. And cocktails were, you know, just sort of, you know, percolating, right? They're coming out of the chrysalis and waking up, right? And I was like, yeah, this would be great. And then following year, you know, following May, June, I graduated, and it's like, cool. Like, nobody really publishes those types of stories, right? Like, you know, I was always, you know, it was hard, like, to get anybody to care. Like, you know, it was like either maybe St. Patrick's Day, or Cinco de Mayo, or the Kentucky Derby. I'm convinced that Cinco de Mayo and the Kentucky Derby, like, have gotten so big recently because drinks writers were like, we really need an excuse to write about drinks. So, like, maybe you could get in Mother's Day, Father's Day,
right.
The holidays, obviously. But, you know, we're talking about, like, small items. The rest of the year is kind of like, you know, like drinks, like who cares, you know? Food was just back. Right?
Sure,
Food was just back, and wine people were getting into. So it was a hard sell, and in those first few years, like, I remember being so envious of Dave Wondrich because he had like 200 words every month in Esquire. And I was like, oh my God, like a third of a page, or a quarter of a page. Like, could you imagine, you know? And then at a certain point, I got like a column in Men's Fitness magazine, which ran a full page, and it was incredible. Like, you look back at those issues, you know, I think Julie Reiner contributed cocktails, Alan Katz, like Naren Young, like Jim Meehan. I mean, it was like really like so far ahead of the curve, in one of those first like national cocktail columns because it had such a large circulation. But at the time, it seemed, it still does, a little odd to be promoting delicious craft cocktails in a fitness magazine.
Well, yeah,
you know, but I was I to complain. You know?
Right. I mean, hey, you gotta reward yourself somehow, right? Like, if you're gonna do the pumping the iron in the gym or whatever, like,
And what was great was that they calculated for each cocktail like the number of calories, carbohydrates, like everything in the bottom, which I thought was always hilarious. But yeah, I mean, it was, you know, those first few years was tough, you know, to get anybody really to care about drinks. And for about, I don't know, 5-6 years, I worked at the Wall Street Journal's magazine, Smart Money, not how to make money, but how to spend it. Including like 3 years as like the travel writer, trying to sneak in as much booze coverage as possible. Like, I think I was one of the first people to write about Del Maguey Mezcal, like a national magazine, and like the Jermaine Robin, all those amazing American brandy, you know, like all this stuff that, like, now I look back and it's kind of hilarious that, like, you know, I was able to write about.
That's awesome.
Trying to find Ron Cooper somewhere, you know, because it was the time before cell phones. You know, so like Ron wasn't at his house. We started Del Maguey, he was an artist, and then he discovered mezcal, and like that sort of became an obsession.
Okay.
And it was like one of these things where it was like, if Ron wasn't in his house, he'd leave a message on the answering machine and hope he called back before like the story
had to come out.
Right. Like I'm like, I gotta fact check this. Please call me back. Like anytime. Like please.
Please.
Yeah, it was kind of funny that way. And then I was fortunate enough to find. I'm bringing the train around this year.
No, I love this. Like, again, we love a good ramble because it just shows that it's.
Well, and then I met a book agent, and I'd always wanted to write a book about drinks. And at the time, if you went to a bookstore, there were like maybe like 3 or 4
Right,
books.
yeah.
It was like Gary Regan and his ex-wife Marty Hagen had written several excellent books. Anthony Dice Blue, Paul Packle, and that was about it.
Yeah.
And then some giant door-stopping book that was like 10,000 cocktail recipes everybody should know. Obviously, there aren't even 10,000 recipes. And that was the whole shelf.
Okay.
Right? Which is kind of hard. It's hard, like, to think about, given like if you go to a bookstore today, it seems like
it's its own section. Yeah.
Miles and miles of cocktail books. But I wanted to write a book. I was able to convince his agent to pitch it, and that turned out to be The Business of Spirits, which came out in 2007, in September 2007. Kaplan, the test prep people, had bought Dearborn, which was like a business press, so it was either going to be the first of many books or the last of few, and I think they only ultimately did a few like under that imprint. And it's still funny because in the back of the book there's like an ad for like the test prep books, which I think is pretty hilarious. Just in case. And that was supposed to be like, it was like trends in the liquor world.
Sure.
And each one, the birth of this super premium vodka, or the rebirth of whiskey, and it's like, someone was just so far ahead of the curve, that book, that like, you could do it, it probably should be in a second or third edition or something, but like, it was always gratifying to go into distilleries and have people like pull it out and be like, yeah, I started this because I read your book, and like,
that's so fucking cool.
And I'd be like, oh my god, why did you do that? Like, I am so sorry, like, if this doesn't work out, like, it's really felt a lot of responsibility. It's one of those things you put out in the world and you never know how it will affect people or change the world, and that was very gratifying. And then for a couple of years I was freelancing mostly about drinks and travel and food, and then I was the founding editor-in-chief of Liquor.com, so I came on board. It's basically just a URL, and finished up my book, The Art of American Whiskey, which is a visual history of American whiskey, told through label art and bottle design, which is something that I've been down in Kentucky.
Quite a bit,
with Bill Samuels from Maker's Mark, and he was like, we were going down to see what would become Maker's 46, and he was like, hey, do you want to make a couple stops? I'm like, I'm in your hands, Bill. Like, whatever you want to show me. He picked me up at the airport in his Astro van, with no air conditioning. And we're like going down, and we went to Heaven Hills Bourbon Heritage Center because his old French teacher, I think, worked there. And I give them a minute, as they're hugging and crying, and I started walking around. I was like, oh my god, like, these labels are incredible. Like, these old, the artwork and everything and I was like, somebody should do a book. Like, and then I was like, wait, I should do a book. Right. And it was like one of those things. By the time I had flown home, I was already like sketching out what would become the
awesome
art of whiskey.
That's so awesome.
And then I came on Daily Beast to start ultimately the Half Full section, which ran for about 6 years, which we won 2 Tales Awards for Best Cocktails and Spirits publication. Dave Wondrich and I co-hosted the podcast Life Behind Bars, which we won a couple more Tales Plates for, and that was a great experience. And then
kind of got our inspiration from a little bit.
It was really fun to do that show, and I think we did over 100 episodes, and it was always fun to get to spend time with Dave and all of our guests, and just it sort of built up to chat with people from Dale DeRoth and Julie Reiner, but also like Dan Aykroyd and Nick Offerman and Andy Roddick, and like
that's
all this
awesome.
weird, and try to find fun stuff to talk to them about. And then, now I'm at Men's Journal as spirits editor. And busy couple of weeks, months, years,
That's awesome.
Decades, yeah. So,
well, I think that's a fucking awesome origin story. So, cheers to that.
cheers to that, yeah.
Drink 2, question 2. What are we drinking?
We're drinking. I mean, I feel like if you're going to come to Milady's, you have to have a daiquiri.
Yeah, of course.
It's one of the best classic daiquiris, I think, really anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, definitely New York State, but I would put this up against any daiquiri, served anywhere. It's funny, like, I don't live that close to Milady's. I live on the Upper West Side, but I feel like Julie's bars, they always feel like my local.
Okay.
Like, I spent a lot of time at Flatiron Lounge, back in the day.
Yeah.
That was my spot. I was there all the time. And then Lanny Kai, or Tiki Bar, Tropical Bar, that was also down here, a few blocks away. I love that place. Downstairs bar. I love drinking daiquiris and Mai Tais there. And I'm so happy when she opened Milady's, or reopened Milady's. I remember being to the original Milady's years ago. Great place for a bottle of beer.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have ordered a
Daiquiri.
but I'm not sure what you would have gotten.
Yeah.
They would have been like, we don't have a frozen,
Yeah.
ice machine, because nobody, back in the day, whoever, who drank just classic daiquiris.
No one, we don't have a blender, so you probably would have got some ice,
blender,
some rum, and some dude would have probably just squeezed some lime with it.
Yeah, it's like,
cheers. Oh.
Well, I think it's funny. It's like, obviously my new book, The Whiskey Bible, which just came out. Everybody always thinks that, like, I just drink whiskey day and night, and I always feel like I'm letting them down a little bit. When they find out that, I also drink other types of things.
I get that quite a bit as well. So
I like rum too.
Yeah.
I like cocktails. I like daiquiris. It doesn't have to be 24/7 whiskey. There's also funny where people will ask me about, there's now so many whiskey distilleries around the country. I mean, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of them at this point, or thousands of brands, and be like, oh, like, what do you think of this one? I'll be like, I've never heard of that one. Like, it's like, it's sold in, you know what I mean? Like, it's not, it doesn't have national distribution. I mean, occasionally, sometimes I'm like, yes, of course, like, that one's amazing. But that was the hardest part of writing this book, was that, each chapter, there's like a history of like American whiskey or Irish whiskey, and everything you need to know about it. And then the second half of the chapter is what I call like family trees, but all of the American whiskeys that Diageo owns or Pernod Ricard. And that way you can also tell, like, I like this one, you might also like that one.
Right.
Sometimes the same people make both.
The
same distillery makes both, or the same mash bill. But that was the hardest part, like deciding what brands to feature, because now in so many categories, there's so many distilleries, so many brands making whiskey that it's like bottling whiskey. So that part was incredibly hard, and like, just trying to figure out, like, oh my god, how to do that, because I didn't want to do tasting notes per se. This stuff changes, and I want people to like be able to, if somebody gives you a bottle, or you see something on the menu and you're like, what is that? And if you come here and be like, oh, okay, here it is, like, within reason, because there's so many.
Well, and again, not question 2 though, but do you think that, like, because again, everybody talks about, we're in the whiskey recession now or whatever, like no one's drinking anymore yet. Fucking bars are packed.
Well, I really don't believe that. Right? Like I'm very bullish. Right? Sales, from what I've heard, from the data shows, is that we're just behind 2019. Right? 2025 was just behind 2019. It makes a ton of sense, right? You take COVID out of the data set, right? People were drinking a lot. We all thought we might die, right?
Right,
it was a very odd time, right? So people were like, you know what? I am going to drink. I'm going to have a cocktail every night, right? We're all home. We needed entertainment. We needed something, distraction. Let's open that bottle of wine that we've been saving. Why not, right? And at the same time, if I'm going to go to the liquor store, like I'm taking my life in my own hands, I'm not going to buy one bottle. I'm going to buy a case. I'm going to buy like a case or two, right? And I think a lot of people did that. I mean, not just toilet paper or hand sanitizer. I mean, I find, like, in our closet, like a giant thing of hand sanitizer, or like, you know, the aspirin jar that we have doesn't have like, I don't know, 25 pills, 50 pills, it has 500.
Yeah, because everybody was stocking up.
They'll go, you know, they'll expire before I'll ever use that. You know, same thing with liquor. So, I mean, like as an industry, we modeled off of that data. So we produced too much booze.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean people aren't drinking,
right?
I mean, it's like that's on us. Like, people are drinking a healthy amount, right? And that is wonderful. And it's very hard, especially with whiskey, which is an aged product, to forecast, right? Because it's not going to be ready for years down the road, right? I mean, most American whiskey, not all, but many are 4 to 6, 8 years. Some are older, 10, 12, 20 years. Obviously, in Scotch, the minimum is basically 10 years at this point. If you can find it, a few companies make a 10-year-old, really 12 years old, 18 years old, 20, 25, 30. So we're trying to like forecast like demand a decade down the road, right? And to be honest, we in 2036, we might be sitting here if we're lucky and knock on wood, drinking Deckers and say, yeah, it's really hard to get that like bourbon, right? Because we should have made more of that 10 years ago. We should have made more of whiskey, you know, which has happened. And again, people treat this like an aberration. It's like, I mean, so much of the story in the Whiskey Bible is this roller coaster ride that whiskey goes on for really since the beginning, but especially in the like 1800s, 20th century, there's incredible ups and downs. And this doesn't even chart. You know what I mean? Like what we're going through now. Yeah. Like this isn't like a big deal. And in previous, you know, previous periods, whether a distillery shut down for a little bit, like might not have been national news, right? It would have been, it just would have happened, right? So, you know, I think we often don't have context, right? And that's the hard thing when people hear that like Jim Beam has shut down, and it's like, yeah, like they've shut down because they've got plenty. This also changes in effect. There's plenty of knob graders, plenty of Jim Beam. Like we're talking years down the road here. They're just saying, you know what, we got to pump the brakes a little bit. We've made too much, and that's okay. Like, I mean, people don't understand a lot of these distilleries are running 24/7, 365, right? With maybe a few weeks to like for maintenance. That was also unprecedented, right? Like 2-3 shifts.
Like it was a full 24/7.
I mean, this is not, you know, there were periods when in history when Scotch distilleries ran 4 days a week, right? And they were only making, and also in America, only making whiskey, you know, certain months of the year, right? This idea that we make whiskey 12 months a year all the time is like a fairly modern thing. Like, it's just been based on this kind of upswing. So again, I don't feel like the sky is falling. I think plenty of people are drinking whiskey. If anything, you know, it's a wonderful time because we're still scratching the surface, right? We're still scratching the surface of interest in people, their knowledge, their understanding. So I think we just all need to like take a deep breath, right? And like actually take a second to think about like the bigger trends that are happening, and you know, we'll be okay.
I agree. So I guess, I mean, that kind of leads perfectly into our question two a little bit, which actually comes from Mike from Travel Bar. So, you know, we love Mike, and Mike, again, is
this is going to be a tough one.
Great resource. I'm going to read it, but I feel like you touched a little bit on question one, but I just want to make sure I get it right. But here...
Mike's like, why do you think you know anything about whiskey, Noah? That's my question.
It's a good Mike impression, too. He says, you've been going to Kentucky before the whiskey boom, visiting distilleries like Heaven Hill. He wants to know, how did that really kind of come about, or why did you see that as a need? Like, you were kind of like one of the first to be like, hey, let's do a distillery tour.
And I mean, I think very curious by nature. I think you have to be, right, to do what we both do. And I've been doing it so long that some of the distilleries were like, no, like we're not open to the public. Like I'm not the public, and they're like, like we're not set up here, right? And there are certain distilleries that I visit where, you have to wear steel-toed boots or steel-toed things over your boots. I thought my boots were steel-toed. They're not, but steel toes over your boots, really comfortable. Hair nets, beard nets,
hats, the
hard hats, eye protection,
vest.
ear protection, definitely. Tyvek suits, I've worn it all already.
At the same time.
Right. Sometimes, literally, where you feel like it's an episode of Breaking Bad or something, right?
Now, say my name.
I just realized, I don't come from a distilling family, right? I'm not a Beam, I'm not a Shapira, I'm not, any of these fans, Samuels, right? Russell, or, Glenfiddich, I mean, so, as an outsider, as, a reporter and writer, I always felt like I needed to know more, right? And, nothing, you can read about stuff, and back in the day, even that was hard, right? So, to, actually figure out what was going on, I realized, okay, I've got to, go, right? Which also, hard job.
Twist my arm, yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have to go to, Scotland and Ireland and, Kentucky, this is going to be so hard. It was wonderful, right? And I didn't, it's just funny. It's I've spent so much time in Kentucky. I'm a Kentucky Colonel. Call me Colonel if you'd like. Nobody does. My family. I tell them they can, but they don't want to. It's fine. It's fine. I don't mind at all. But yeah, it's one of these things where it's so hard sometimes to figure out what's actually going on if you're not there, right? So even for the Whiskey Bible, so much of it required so much going back to original sources, going back to documents, going to places, talking to people, and maybe it's hubris, but a lot of these projects I'm like, oh, I know everything, right? This is gonna be easy, even the Oxford Companion too, David and I'm all right, and then it's the hard part would just be getting everything up here onto the print, it's just hard enough, right? And then you start digging in and you're like, wow, that was hubris. We don't know anything. This isn't at all what we thought, right? So a lot of that requires going to places, actually seeing how things are made, or even just, people talk about, processes fermentation, right? And it's a means to an end. And then we ferment the grains and blah, 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 we get the beer, then we distill it. Well, the devil's in the details. Right? The best whiskeys, the people, my buddy Todd Leopold in Denver, he's a brewer. Todd has a degree in brewing from, that's his passion. And that shows, to make whiskey, you first have to make beer, and then you distill the beer. He's really a master at fermentation, which, maybe for most people it's probably, perhaps more information that they want to know. but you really, to make the best whiskey, you have to make the best beer. And even just for the Whiskey Bible, going down the rabbit hole of understanding that you have to put the grains in a certain order. Some of that was just a step beyond, right? But I needed to know that, right? I was the world's worst chemistry student in high school and college. One of the happiest days of my life was when I realized I took chemistry in freshman year of college, and I realized I could drop the second semester and still get credit for the first and take the first pass fail, and somehow miraculously I passed.
All right.
But learning all that stuff, just, part of it is even you have to learn all this stuff, and then it for a book or an article, it's a paragraph, right? But you need that base, you need to know why it works, how it works. So, to answer Mike's question, I think it was curiosity, right? Okay. And it's part of it is just, if you're going to write about something, but you got to go. Yeah. You got to see with your own eyes. And sometimes some of the stuff that I thought, once you get to the distillery or that place, you realize, oh, it's not at all what I expected. I remember visiting Reka, the William Grant vodka in Iceland, and they were, and people were, oh, it's it's geothermically, all the energy for the distillery is geothermic, and it's it's green and all this stuff, and then like, all right, cool, and I'm thinking the distillery is geothermically powered, right? And then you get to Iceland and you realize the whole island is geothermically powered, right? Like the McDonald's is geothermically powered, like everything is, because all of the energy comes from converting hot water to the Blue Lagoons. So it's all these funny things.
Do you have because I really hate when people say like, once you've been to one distillery, you've been to them all, which you
no, I would say no, and in fact, I don't even like. I mean, now this sounds ridiculous, but some people will go to like 3-4 distilleries a day, or they'll say, "Hey, do you want to come with us? We're going to go to what fill in the blank area," and I'll be like, "Great, like can I say itinerary?" I'll be like 3 distilleries a day. I'm like, "Nah, I'm good." Like, you don't want to go? I'm like, "No, I want to go, but I want to spend literally at least a day and use distillery, or at least half a day, but like a full day ideally, right? Where, because if you visit 3-4 in a day, sure, like you'll learn exactly. Like they're all basically the same, right? You hear like, blah, 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 gotta go, bye. Yeah. All runs together. But if you're there for half a day or a day, 2 days, right? Then you hear about it, all the ways that they are different, right? And that's the most important, right? Where you're like, and you get to ask all your questions, and maybe I don't have any shame. Maybe there's some German word for for not having curiosity, but no shame, right? And I realize often that like, if I have a question, I'm just going to ask it, right? And I truly believe there are no stupid questions when it comes to cocktails and spirits. People should ask it, right? And like sometimes those elicit incredible answers, right? And you're like, wow, like what? Like, you know what I mean? Like that, and those are the types of things, those are the types of moments, spending time with master distillers, blenders, coopers, whoever it is, learning about the craft, you learn so much. And it's often like, those moments at dinner or at the bar or walking around the property, look, at its basis, yes, all distilleries basically run the same way, right? I mean, but in reality, they all do it their own way, right? And it's like every restaurant in Rome has the same menu, right? It's almost, but all the food tastes different, right? So it's like every we're in New York, right? We have how many pizzerias? All the pizzas different.
I think we have like 4 just there.
It's like it takes time to understand what they're doing, and like for them to tell you, reveal, a little bit of the magic, that is their whiskey. Yeah.
Well, there we go. Question 2. Cheers.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Question 3, drink 3. What are we drinking?
Drinking a whiskey mule.
Excellent.
Essentially like a Moscow mule.
Very nice.
Dark and stormy, but made with whiskey, ginger beer, a little citrus, lime juice. Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah. Oh, that is the spot.
That is.
Their homemade ginger syrup. It's wow.
That's perfect for a day like today. I mean,
it's perfect for any day.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, like, it's cold as fucking balls, but like that immediately takes you someplace. Yeah. But then also it's full of vitamin C to make you feel better. So
it's also the type of drink that I wish everybody who says like you can't use whiskey in a cocktail, but like try this one, my friend.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Like that works. Yeah, that works. Yeah.
Love it. Oh.
All right, bring on your question.
Yes. All right. So, question 3: why do you feel that whiskey finally deserved a Bible?
Wow. Well, I mean, I think to be honest, if I'm gonna be honest, whiskey probably deserved a Bible a long time ago, right? Like, and it's one of these things where I can fix that mistake, right? Where it should have had a Bible a long time ago.
Rectifying a wrong.
Yeah, I think fixing that wrong, and to be honest, like in some ways, do I wish that I had written it 25 years ago? Absolutely. I mean, each at this point we'd have multiple editions ideally, but it would have also been a lot easier, right? Because now that's like the whiskey world covers so much. Sure. Even like when I was writing this, it was like the last chapter's about all this sort of world whiskey made in places that don't traditionally make whiskey, whether we're talking about France or India or the Middle East or all these places that like you're like, wait, what? They make whiskey there? It's like, yeah, and Australia, New Zealand, right? I mean, future editions. Some of those places would probably need, knock on wood, their future editions.
Right.
Like a future edition. If there are future editions, I would lobby that probably Australia and New Zealand probably will need their own because there's so much interesting stuff going on, and maybe some of these other regions too, India too. And what I love about it is that whiskey truly reflects where it's made, what it's made from, and the people who make it, right? So, I love it when people aren't just like, I'm gonna try to make bourbon. I mean, obviously, we call bourbon has to be in America, but make bourbon-like, or
right.
I'm gonna make scotch outside of Scotland. Of course, you can't call it scotch, but scotch-like, or I'm gonna make single malt. You can say single malt anywhere, and I'm gonna make it like a Highland single malt. It's like, well, you know what? There's no point because they're really, really good Highland single malts, really, really good bourbons from all of America, across America. And fortunately, I think we've now reached this sort of second generation where people are like, I'm going to make a whiskey that reflects our traditions, our culture, our values, our grains, our traditions, methods, and you get these wonderful whiskeys that really taste like their own thing, and and I love that we're expanding the world of whiskey, even though it took me that was more work, but it was worth it, right? Because for the finished product, and you get all these amazing things that nobody's ever done before. Like you get Starward, from Australia, where they're using fresh wine barrels, right? Like red wine barrels, right, from all the vineyards, and it's great, right? It's probably better than any whiskey I've ever tasted, aged in a wine barrel, right? And it's like, wow, that's so different than anything that anybody else does, and it's wonderful. Like, so it's exciting to see what else comes down the pipe, like what else people take this idea. I mean, whiskey, has to be made from grains, right? Make beer first. You're grinding up grains. You're essentially making beer from the sugars in the grains. There's only a few ingredients. It's grains, water, yeast, and I would say the fourth ingredient is the barrel, right? The type of barrel, because it contributes so much flavor, color, everything, and it's so many properties. But it's really 3-4 ingredients, and that's it, right? And it's all of this amazing spectrum of flavor comes from essentially how you were doing each step. And clearly, even though the box is pretty small, still so much innovation taking place and so many exciting things. And as a writer, that's awesome. What better situations you ask for.
Did you write with the idea that there would be different versions of the book?
No. I mean, as a I think a writer, you have to manage your expectations. Sure. Right? Like, just would I love that? To do another edition in a few years? Absolutely. Yeah. But you it's kind of I mean, some of it's nothing but in this regard, it's like being an athlete, where you gotta lay it all out.
Sure.
You gotta leave everything on the court, right? You can't hold back. This is it, right? Like if there's never another edition, well, so be it. I put everything I possibly could into this book and didn't hold anything back, and this is it. And if there are future ones, that would be amazing. And I think certainly by the time that happens, the world will have evolved. There will be, on the back of the book, there's an appendix with 60 cocktail recipes, 30 classic whiskey cocktails, 30 modern classics from top bartenders around the world. And that's almost its own book in itself, right? That could be obviously expanded, whenever, hopefully between now and then we'll see other amazing cocktails invented, other classics certainly will include, other distilling regions, brands. I mean, that was also one of my worst fears, was that some kind of huge whiskey news would break while the book was being printed or something, and close as we came to that was that the federal government in the U.S. finally, for a while they were considering making an official category for American single malt, and it was literally the late December of 2024 when it finally became a category, and I was like, of course, like messaging my editor immediately. I was like, okay, listen, like we gotta like update, like we were still like preparing the book for the printer, so fortunately had like a minute to do this, but it was pretty much like at the penultimate moment, like like we were like, oh god, like we gotta get this done. And I was happy that we were able. I mean, it didn't require that much revision, but so happy that we were able to get that in. And thankfully, like knock on wood, like there haven't been like most of the news have been fairly small, so it's not been, it's still relevant. But, it's trying to future-proof for this.
Sure. Was there anything in the book or in the research of the book, that challenged your beliefs when writing the book about whiskey? Like,
I mean, like I would say everything.
Okay.
Right? Like it's, like you go in and I was like, okay, like I'm just gonna put everything in my mind on paper, and then you start looking at things and like you're like, oh, I'd love to quote whatever it is, and then you go back and you're like, wait, that doesn't say that, right? I mean, like everybody talks about like the Red Book of Ossuary, which sounds like something from Game of Thrones.
I drink and I know things.
As the piece of evidence, the smoking gun that proves that people were making whiskey in Ireland before Scotland. It took weeks to figure out, to find the text, what people were talking about, right? I finally found like different versions of it. It turns out to be a religious text in Latin. I wasn't a very good Latin student, but even I found a translation, and it's nothing to do with distilling. Turns out it was like a note written in the margins, right? Like you were using kind of like scrap paper. Finally find this like academic journal from the late 1800s that's discussing this. And like there's a little bit about it, about distilling, and it's like, this idea that it talks about sort of distilling wine, but obviously people are in Ireland, they're not growing grapes, they're growing grains, so that they would be making really means that this is distillation. There's already a leap of faith, right? And then it's like, well, it's in the collection of the church in Kilkenny, and it's like, okay, I've never been to Kilkenny. I'm not Irish. I don't know that much. I know about Irish history, but I don't know about that Irish history, right? Well, it turns out that Kilkenny was a stronghold of the English when they colonized Ireland. Okay, and the Archbishop was English.
Yeah.
And if this was his hand that wrote this quote-unquote distilling recipe, so that would be English knowledge, which is obviously an outcome that nobody saw coming, we've ever known, right? And it's like, wait, the English start making whiskey, and then it goes to Scotland and Ireland. I mean, Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales talks a little bit about distilling beer. There's a reference. Wow, like like that. Talk about something where you're like, what the fuck is going on, right? And there were many moments like that where, in the middle of the night or, writing this, researching it, and you discover things that completely, there's so many examples.
Yeah.
And often, like, I was happy to call somebody like Dave Lunch to be like, what do you think about this? And be like, even Dave sometimes was like, wow, like, I don't know, like, let me look, like, like this idea about, there's a whole, we go down the whole rabbit hole about when America starts using new oak barrels, and I realized like that wasn't a thing like really before Prohibition. Like maybe some people did new oak, but a lot of people used especially for rye.
Right.
I was like, Dave, I think the rye whiskey was aged in used oak barrels, and he was like, what? Like, like it was one of these things. I was like. And then he was like, yeah, you know what, you're right. Yeah. Like, I found this. And sometimes it's like, these are things that we've read over and over again. In this context, it's like, oh, yes, like I've read this article like 4 times, 10 times now, and overhauled. I think you're right. Like, that's what they're talking about, right? And it's like finding the missing piece of the puzzle, and it's like, oh. Like, okay, like that's really cool. And part of what the smoking gun really was, I found like an article from a syndicated column in DC about like what went on in the hallways of Congress. It was basically described this fight over new and used barrels.
Okay.
And it was like the bourbon lobby, which was also the Coopers had already lost the beer producers to steel kegs, so they knew they couldn't lose the whiskey guy. So it was like not only advantageous for bourbon to be using new barrel, the Coopers are from the same area, you know, all the sawmills in Appalachia, you know, the wood, everything, right? So it goes hand in hand, same lobby. But also as a way to kind of stick it to the rye producers, right? And rye and bourbon, like now we think of it as like people making both, but back in the day you either made bourbon or you made rye. And either you drank bourbon or you drank rye. And those are two different audiences, and this was a way for the bourbon producers to really kind of, like really just sort of get an edge on the rye producer. The rye producers fight tooth and nail to get these, like, essentially the government is trying to create standards of identity after Prohibition in order partially to collect taxes, right? And the rye producers fight tooth and nail to try to get the ability to use both new or used cooperage, used barrel, and they lose. And they ultimately, right? And that was really fascinating to be like, wow, like before like 30s, some of the people were using, especially rye producers, used barrels, which makes a lot of sense.
Sure,
But it's just, it was one of those things which totally upturned everything I thought I knew about American whiskey, because you ask people, when did we always, you know, now to make bourbon rye, you have to use new barrel. You don't use it once. Like, when we, we've always done it this way. Like, you know, blah, blah, or like, you know, or
the way it's been,
or this or that. And it's like, no, there's pretty, like, definitive moment, actually, like, when, and almost in every chapter, there's something like that where my mind was blown over and over again in a way that I was like, what? Like, this is crazy. And that, to be honest, like, you know, when I first, the work with my publisher came to me in 2020, because obviously the wine Bible, they wanted the whiskey Bible, and I thought I'd spend most of my time, like, traveling, but in fact, most of the time was spent partially because of COVID, but it's a good thing because a lot of archives and libraries had digitized so much stuff.
Sure.
Suddenly had access to, like, all these collegiate libraries who would send sections of books, if not the whole book, and it was like suddenly all of this new information that completely changed my view.
That's awesome.
Of whiskey.
Awesome. Well, there we go. Cheers. Cheers. Question 4, drink 4. What are we drinking?
I mean, we're in Manhattan. I feel like we have to drink Manhattans at some point. Right?
Perfect, yeah.
We're talking about whiskey.
Yeah.
So cheers.
Cheers.
I also love the half size, the sort of snackery size. Perfect temperature, right?
Yep.
Perfect.
That's amazing, yeah.
Oh, it's just exactly what I want. It's too drinkable.
Yeah.
Too drinkable.
Ladies has some of the best drinks. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like when you said that's your local, I agree with you. Like,
I'm sorry I dragged you here.
No, yeah, damn you, yeah.
So sorry.
Yeah, no, but it's like, it's always on my list of people to have, like, people are in town or wherever, they're like, where do we drink? And I'm like, you gotta go late. Like, just for the pure just enjoyment of it, like, just the excitement.
Yeah.
So, so, all right, well, question 4, hang on, I gotta read it just because I want to make sure I get all the pieces right. 2025 was a big year for you. Became spirits editor for Men's Journal.
Correct.
Editor at large for Bartender Magazine.
Correct.
Author of the Whiskey Bible.
Correct.
What's 2026 got in store for you?
I mean, if you told me, like, I'm like retroactively exhausted.
Yeah.
Right? Just hearing all that.
Yeah. I'm exhausted.
If you had told me that I would do all that stuff, I would not have believed you. And Men's Journal, when I came on in May, we've stepped back into print publishing after several years. So they were like, we're going to do a whiskey issue in the fall, and you're going to edit it. And I was like, oh, okay, like, that's cool. Like, what? Like, that's amazing. So it was really awesome to, put together a whole issue on whiskey and commission folks like Robert Simonson to do a great story about, famous whiskey moments in movies. I did a profile of Sam Ross.
Yep.
One of our writers did a bike tour of bourbon country. We had celebrity chef Edward Lee doing pairing of whiskey and holiday foods. Excerpt from Dave Wunsch's book, the cocktail history, the cocktail history, his illustrated book, which is amazing, which just came out. Excerpt from my new book, Whiskey Bible, plus all this other stuff, and it was like, all right, that's pretty cool. 2025 was like a very, very
You were busy.
It was a busy, wonderful year. Lots of once in a lifetime kinds of things. Dave Wondrich and Phil Green and I did a talk at the Smithsonian. Tales was a blur of excitement. 2026 will be interesting to see what it holds. I can tell you that bartender Kenta Goto and I, we're finishing up right now a new book.
Oh wow, awesome!
That will be called the Goto Bartender's Guide. So
Okay.
With all of Kenta's incredible recipes for both classic and original cocktails, and so much, for the first time, really publicly sharing, his techniques, methods. He sort of thought about every part of cocktail making and sort of refined it. I mean, those of us who, I got to meet Kenta at Pegu Club when he was, he started out, and then he was the head bartender for the years, and then now obviously he runs Bar Goto and Bar Goto Nibbon in Brooklyn, not too far
right from my house. Yep.
I wish I lived closer. I love that bar. It's just been a privilege to, again, to work with somebody where you're like, okay, cool, like I thought I knew about cocktails, and it's like just working on this project with him, just seeing like all of his incredible epiphanies, and the fact that he's willing to share that
It's awesome.
with the world. I can't wait for that book to come out. That'll be out in October for Penn Speech.
Oh shit! Damn.
Yeah, so that'll be a big launch. So
That'd be awesome.
yeah, so it's I think 3 books. The Oxford Companion, obviously it took 7 years. So, or
Now you're just doing one a year.
right. But now it's like 3 books in. It'll be 3 books in like 5 years. So that's even for me, that's aggressive. That'll be the Goto Bartender's Guide is another, beautiful book. Eric Metzger, who shot the cover of the Oxford Companion, Spirits and Cocktails. He also shot the spine, which is maybe my favorite part of this whole book, with this long pour.
Yeah.
Because it's such a big spine, I said to Eric, can you do a long pour? And this is Dave's antique Sazerac, I think.
That's awesome.
Like bartending tools, and Eric was like, yeah, I can do that. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, totally. And that was really cool. So Eric shot all the photos for the Goto Bartender's Guide, so that, and which is all of his beautiful work. So that I'm really excited for that to come out, and obviously Bartender Magazine, we're cranking 4 issues a year, and then online, and I love it. It's so old school. We do like a calendar every year, like an actual calendar.
That's
which
awesome.
is so cool. It's the oldest continuously printed publication for people working in the trade. And the whole mission is to celebrate and support the industry and bartenders, and
Kate Kerwin was on the cover.
Oh,
Yeah. We love Kate. Yeah.
It was founded by Ray Foley, in the 70s. He was a bartender, and
kid,
people said to him, he was like, I'm going to do a magazine for bartenders. And they laughed in his face. And they were like, why do bartenders need a magazine? What? And Ray was a visionary, but also super stubborn. And he was like, he and his wife were like, Jackie were like, no, we're going to create this magazine. Ray passed away a few years ago, but his son Ryan Foley was on, obviously put out a book about non-alcoholic cocktails recently. Has carried the torch. Has picked up, and
That's awesome. Well, there we go. Question 4.
Cheers.
Cheers. Push 5, drink 5. Last drink of the night. What are we drinking?
I think we have to have a whiskey neat.
Of course.
And to be honest, I find myself often gravitating to Michter's products. Right? The bourbon, the rye, so good. I mean, who would have ever thought that we'd be here drinking rye in Manhattan? I mean, unbelievable, right? That we'd come back. I don't think few people understand how far rye had fallen off. Like, it was circling the drain, right? It was on life support. So, makes me very happy to be here with you.
Wow, same.
In Manhattan, drinking rye, right? America's original whiskey. So,
cheers. All right, so question 5 comes down to the flip of the Whiskey Wednesday coin. You can flip it, you can spin it, you can do whatever you want. The coin will give us the answer. You don't have to answer unless you feel so inclined to answer. But one side says fuck yeah, one side says fuck no. So, question 5.
oh god.
Does whiskey still surprise you?
I mean, I don't even need to spin it. I'm not even going to leave this up to chance.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, I would imagine, I would hope that it would land on fuck yeah.
Yeah, but
absolutely. I mean, that's one of these, I mean, that's what makes writing about cocktails and spirits so wonderful, right? That almost every day, like, I find out something that surprises me. I find out something else that, like, interests me. Some other rabbit hole to go down. And just when we think we figured out everything, you realize, I don't know anything. Right? So that's the wonderful thing. I mean, there's another layer to excavate, right? There's, you know, we feel like we've excavated everything, and then you realize there's a whole other civilization, right, underneath, right? There's another 1,000 years of history to get there, and you know, we're just scratching the surface. So, I mean, I am certainly not bored, and at the end of the day, we get to drink whiskey for a living.
There we go.
So,
terrible job, right?
It could be a lot worse. So, this isn't fun, it's on me, right?
Right.
So.
Well, there we go. That is 5 drinks down, 5 questions answered. No, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having
Thank you to Julie and the team here at Milady's for having
Absolutely.
us. Really appreciate it. And until we can drink together again, cheers.
To you.